I'm going to read this evening from some new poems, some poems from a couple of recent books, and from a little bit of prose as well. And I want to begin with a poem set in Provincetown, Massachusetts, where I live most of the time. And this, I suppose it's been about 2 years ago now in Provincetown, we had a rather remarkable occurrence when a juvenile humpback whale swam into the harbor and spent several days around the fishing piers where the last of the Portuguese fishing fleet is docked. This was an occasion both of fear, because some parts of this harbor are relatively shallow, and of great wonder because the whale was breaching so close to the pier where the entire town had gathered to watch. Not much goes on in our town, particularly off-season. So if one were standing on the edge of the pier, the whale would be breaking the surface of the water at, say, about the fourth row of the theater here, if this were the dock. So to be that close to such a great incarnation of otherness was a kind of extraordinary opportunity. This is called visitation. When I heard he had entered the harbor and circled the wharf for days, I expected the worst. Shallow water, confusion, some accident to bring the young humpback to grief. Don't they depend on a compass lodged in the salt-flooded folds of the brain, some delicate musical mechanism to navigate their true course? How many ways, in our century's late iron hours, might we have led him to disaster? That, in those days, was how I'd come to see the world. Dark upon dark, any sense of spirit and embattled flame sparked against wind-driven rain till pain snuffed it out. I thought, this is what experience gives us. And I moved through my life carefully while I waited enough. It wasn't that way at all. The whale, exuberant, proud maybe, playful like the early music of Beethoven, cruised the footings for smelts clustered near the pylons in mercury flocks. He, do I have the gender right? Would negotiate the rusty hulls of the Portuguese fishing boats, Holy Infant, Little Marie, with what could only be read as pleasure, coming close, then diving, trailing on the surface big spreading circles until he'd breach, thrilling us with the release of pressured breath and the bulk of his sleek young head, a wet black leather sofa barnacled with ghostly lice.
Why don't you say a little bit about where you came from? And along the way, maybe how writing started to figure into who you were becoming.
I was born in Tennessee in 1953. My father was an Army engineer, so we moved all the time. We left the South when I was a little boy and lived in the Southwest and in Florida and in the Antelope Valley for a while, not so far away, in Northern California too. Lots of sense of disruption and isolation because of that. From the time that I could read, I was always writing something. I, as a child, did not write poetry. I wanted to write novels and screenplays and stories and television shows. And I began to seriously write poems when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. And I suppose they began with writing in journals, those sort of journals which weren't intended to chronicle what happened, but intended to provide a sort of emotional safety valve. And gradually the words themselves and the images and cadences of those words became more important than just their expressive qualities. They began to feel like something that offered a kind of safety and possibility.
One of the things that's really startling about your work is that you seem to know the names of everything. Well, you do. I mean,
I like to shop, you know, which helps one.
yes, but you're a conscious shopper. That makes a difference. Some people, shopping makes them unconscious. This is good, Mark. But I wanted to direct that a little bit to the fact of landscape and place, in that you are now going to be living sometimes in the West. You're in Salt Lake City. And I'm wondering if you might say a little bit about what the change in landscape, the change in atmosphere may already be doing to what you're thinking about writing, how you're going about putting work together. Anything happening yet?
Well, I've written one poem since I've been living in Salt Lake City, which is about 7 weeks now, and it's a poem about a store called Fish R Us, and so it's
Not what
it's
I
a very
had in mind.
suburban landscape. Well, you know, I think part of the inheritance of growing up as a person who moved a great deal was, along with having a sense of myself as an outsider, a sense of myself as an observer and someone who figured out where he was in the world by looking carefully and by trying to name what was there. I had a disagreement with my friend Yosef Komanyako a while ago, who said that he thought that naming was the thing that stands between us and experience, and that it's the human capacity and desire to name which gets us in trouble with our environment. And it seems to me that it's what we don't name that we have a harder time seeing and therefore taking care of or being responsible to. So the more that we can name the world around us, the more we know it's there, you know?